Zoom's added a bunch of bizarre apps to my screen. Okay. It was, oh yeah, and my point was I also, since it's so cold, I have to like basically, you know, de-thaw my computer every morning. So it's just kind of like I'm holding a block of ice here. We don't have central air in Japan, so you just have to do space heaters.
Yeah, it's a pretty American thing, to be
Yeah, yeah.
honest.
I've heard it. Where was it? Oh, yeah, I was reading a book about geography of places, and it was talking about Saudi Arabia, and if you visit um Riyadh or whatever in like summer, bring a coat because they iced up every hotel and inner spot so much. Thailand, I remember I had a Thai friend that said that they all indoor spaces were ice cubes in the summer because they just go nuts with the air conditioning.
I love that. I mean, that's like pretty much what I choose to migrate to, are nice places that have great air conditioning. So I'm maybe there's like a nice list out there of like places to vacation that are known for having frigid air, air control. Vegas is another good one. Vegas is usually like nice and crispy in some of those casinos in the middle of the night.
And I love the Carousel Progress, but the only reason it's still there is because it's air conditioned in summer. So that's always a good one.
Top
Um,
10 human inventions by far, in my opinion,
yeah,
is the condensing air cooler with the central AC system.
the wall units in Japan, it's kind of funny. And I'm teaching or whatever in the classrooms, like I'll have this little battle turning it on and off because I want the room not to be cold. But then if it's on for a while, it like starts to dry out my sinuses, and I'm like, oh, I can't deal with that. Start hacking, so then I have to turn it off again. Yeah, so there is a bit of push pull. I honestly, it's weird living in Japan. You really do start to just acclimatize to the seasons more. Like it's just like I'm gonna be relatively cold the next 2 months, and in summer I'll be sweating half the time. So
Yeah, I mean, so I've been on the other end of the extreme for a while, because even before I lived in Florida for the last like 2 decades, I lived in Texas for a little bit, and it was like notable if it snowed like one day. Uh, Prior to that, I grew up in upstate New York, so I have all the fond memories as a kid of snow, but none of the adult memories, which I'm kind of happy about.
yeah, I'm coming from Atlanta. I'm mostly the opposite. I mean, the whole city shuts down if there's like a centimeter of snow. So I think the city of Atlanta has like five snowplows for 5 million people. But
Yeah, I don't see
yeah,
anything that could go wrong.
but yeah, really. Um, hold on, let me
So
just bring.
I hope we're ready to get a little bit weird today,
Oh, sure, why not? Because I'm
because we could have gone in a couple directions, but I've found some interesting notes on just the backstories of the original writers, some backstories on the written sequel, and then I also watched the classic cartoon and then the '96 live action remake. Those are
okay.
the ones that I managed to watch.
That same here. I mean, actually, having watched the remake, well, it's not like I loved the remake, but I'm now I'm like, oh, okay, now I see why maybe they wanted to make that Cruella movie like last year, right? Because before
Mhm.
seeing the '90s, I'm what? Why? I guess I should just start this up and we can just like roll into all of it then.
Yeah, man.
So,
And I've seen Cruella too, but I didn't see it recent enough to review it for this.
well, your screen is flipping it in my screen. That's weird.
Yeah,
Zoom just
I'm seeing that too. Thank
Zoom
you,
just
Zoom.
Zoom just updated like right before I got on. I feel like this isn't like the best update, maybe. But anyway, it's mostly a sound thing, so hopefully, will cause people seizures if they're watching this on YouTube or something.
That's right. Two of me is an improvement.
um, Let me leave a 3 second gap and I'll do an intro then. Hello. This is the Occult Disney podcast where we look for the hidden Mickeys behind the movies. I guess I wrote something like that onto our new artwork, but I don't remember quite what it was. And I think I wrote it different somewhere else. But you get the general vibe there. It's cool. Hi, this is Matt Colleges here. As always, joining me is Thomas Gorence, the Paranoid American. Hi.
That's me. Yep, Thomas from Paranoid America. Hey, how's it going?
pretty good. I was telling you before, I'm freezing, but and yeah, if you are watching this on YouTube, sorry for the totally surreal flashing. It's like a horror movie or something. So weird zoom updates. Okay, you know what? Maybe if I just do a quick flip. Oh, there I am. Today's film, of course, 101 Dalmatians, a film I think was mostly off of my radar. Like I think I saw it when I was a kid, like where they just take all the kindergartners to the weekday matinee to keep them out of everyone's hair. I'm pretty sure I saw this movie that way, and I haven't seen it since. And somehow it got in my mind this was very much like a second tier Disney film. But doing the research, the year it came out, it was like the sixth top grossing film. Of course, they did all these remakes. And the one that blew my mind is they re-released it in 1991, and it was like the 11th highest grossing movie that year, something crazy like that, just from the re-release. I'm like, whoa, people like this, I guess, more than I thought.
I mean, it definitely wasn't second tier. If anything, it stood for like the new production method that they had, where they were starting to use Xerox instead of, I assume, just everything prior to this was actually hand painting on cells. But this one, I guess, you can see there's a lot more like pencil sketches and a lot more of kind of like rough artwork in some of the shots. And I don't know if that was just a side effect of like the upsampled versions that we get to watch today, or if that was just inherent in the original new processes they were figuring it out.
Yeah, I guess it's like Sleeping Beauty is such a big production. Like when you're following the Disney through line or whatever, this can't help but feel like a little bit of a step down, I guess. But of course,
In some
technologically,
ways. But at the same time, I can't remember any other Disney movie prior to this one that actually has so many different unique animated elements on the screen at the same time. So they leverage a lot of the technology in that way. So they've got no one, I don't think I've ever seen more than maybe, I'm just going to throw a random number out there, but definitely not more than like 20 animated elements on the screen at one time in most of the old classic ones. Whereas this one, in a lot of the frames, you've got all sorts of different characters animating in different planes and stuff. So I don't know. For that reason, it was really interesting to me. And it was, again, I don't really mind seeing some of those like sketchier artworks, and they didn't stand out as much because there were so many of them. If it was a classic one, sometimes just like a little bit of the background being out of focus or just one little thing out of line sticks out a lot more. In this case, there was so much of this kind of, penciled sketch background bleeding through in some of the scenes that I just got accustomed to it, and I kind of liked it.
oh yeah, yeah. Like I said, coming back to this movie, I was like I could appreciate it more. We did Lady and the Tramp a little while back. I'm like, I feel like this is a better version of that kind of
Yeah,
vibe.
yeah, I agree.
So, because that one, I mean, now I'm like, what was the story? Tramp gets them in trouble. They go to the pound. They get out. Was that it? This one has a little more meat to the bones, and fur to the meat to the bones. That yeah, of course.
I also appreciated some of the darker sort of aspects of it. Like they were actually going to kill these puppies. They're talking about hitting them over the head and skinning them, so they didn't kind of like skirt around the issue quite as much in the cartoon or in the remake.
Would you consider yourself more of a dog person or a cat person?
Probably a dog person, yeah.
Okay,
But like
we
I've had both. I've got both, so.
yeah, I grew when growing up we had both, and I guess I spent more time with the dog, but I think I'm more of a cat person. To be perfectly honest, I'm probably like a no pet person. I don't want to have to be thinking about those sorts of things, but
I have to say though, this, I don't want to sound like an elitist as from the standpoint of dogs, but there's some dogs out there that are just kind of like a dog that's just, I'm a dog, I'm dumb. I just, I eat, I run around and I get sticky. And then there's some dogs that have like a full-blown personality and, kind of like adapt and turn into like a little friend. And I don't know where that line is, but I've definitely met both types of those dogs. And the same thing with like cats. Like sometimes you've got a cat that's got like a really strong personality that only you know about, and then nobody else ever sees it because it's just like either sleeping or hiding the entire time. So like on those ends of the extreme, I really love a great dog versus a great cat. But I think I might like a dumb cat more than a dumb dog.
Yeah.
Does that help?
Kind of, yeah. My aunt always had two cats in the house when I was growing up, and when you'd visit you'd never see the cats. They would successfully hide the entire time. It was amazing.
So all
So,
you get is the smell and nothing else, right?
and the
The
fur.
smell and the fur. Yeah.
That's right. um I will say for the dogs, I think the bigger the better. It's the small ones that are super yappy and barking at 3 a.m. and the larger the dog is, the more chill. So Dalmatians are in a pretty good territory. I think if you're gonna have a dog that's, they seem to be a little sharper. I guess. What did I have? Of course, I had a mutt as George Carlin. We don't know what the hell it is, but I think it was like miniature collie, golden retriever mix or something. So yeah, a medium-sized dog. That seems to be the best one to have around.
Where would you cut the limit off? Like how many Dalmatians do you think you could realistically handle?
Oh, two. Yeah, they're not
Two.
having kids. No, you get them neutered or whatever, right?
You old rascal. Yeah.
So yeah, I don't. Our yeah, I guess our dog was mildly dumb because he chased his own tail a lot. So,
I
or
think
maybe it's
at
just
my
fun.
height, I think I had six golden retrievers mixed with labs, and at the same time, we had like two or three smaller dogs. So that I mean that was a decent amount of dogs for one household to contain, and those were huge bags of old Roy, that we would have to go and grab every other day essentially and feed these monsters.
Yeah, see, I can barely be bothered to like take out the trash. So, I mean, I do. I'm just like, barely, I get it done, right?
And just
um,
I mean just to start this off right too, I had the random idea of if you legitimately had 100 Dalmatians, like a realistic scenario, and let's say you even got the plantation that they were talking about, but how much food are we talking about, and how much are you cleaning up after these dogs? And I think I did some of the math to figure out the exact amounts, which was a little bit surprising to me.
well, you become a dog wrangler and you just, you know, invade supermarkets and stuff, once the dogs get a little bit older and have a little bit of a attack power. Because think about that, give it 1 year, and you have like an army of dogs to take the food you want from where you need to take it.
Well, and an adult dog is Dalmatian is somewhere between 40 and 70 pounds. So you start doing the math on that, by an order of magnitude, it starts adding up quite a bit. So you either have to have a lot of acreage just to spread out, all the dog poop on top of all the food that you would need.
Or you prepare to ransack the target with your army of dogs, which sounds fun. If you
But
had a
even then, you
hundred.
can only do it so many times until they're out of food, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Then hopefully they restock the stores. Maybe
Yeah.
you didn't close them. I don't know. Yeah.
They just put up with you for 10 years plus.
You said you had a lot to say about the book, which is The 101 Dalmatians by Dottie Smith and the author. So do you want to go there first?
Well, I wanted to note that the original author, Dodie Smith, there's a little bit of an interesting backstory. So her husband was this guy, Alec Macbeth Beasley, and I guess they both got Hollywood struck. So they end up moving to Beverly Hills or into Malibu. And they both want to be, in films, and they both have like a little bit of a kick from acting. And Alec Macbeth Beasley, her husband, is kind of an interesting character because his dad was one of the Titanic survivors, and he wrote a book called The Loss of the Titanic SS or something like this. And he actually describes like getting on the boat and like how nice it is and going for a little workout, all the way up to the point where he gets saved and he actually makes it off alive. And it was just lacking some of the pizzazz that I was expecting from like a huge survivor of the Titanic. But it was just, oh, I didn't even know that the boat was sinking. I was dancing and I felt a little off balance, so I went and I checked and I asked if everyone was okay, and they said everything was fine. So I went back to my room, and then I came back out again, and and the boat was sinking. So I just walked over, and there was an open sort of safety boat that I was able to get on with my kid, and they lowered us down, and they almost dropped another boat on top of us, but we shouted and they moved it out of the way, and And that was pretty much like, and then he gets saved. So it wasn't the same as the Titanic movie. I definitely think the Titanic movie was a little bit more compelling than this guy's recounting of it, but it was interesting nonetheless. And then that guy's mom was also a famous actress. She was in the Jabberwocky. She was in a bunch of Pink Panther movies. She was also in some Hammer horror movies from the 60s and 70s, which is kind of cool. So there's a little bit of a backstory of them already, being familiar with Hollywood. And then the Cruella de Vil in the Dodie Smith's autobiography mentions that it was based on one of her friends, and one of her friends actually noted that she thought that her dogs would make a nice coat. And I don't know if it was, like a set in jest, or it was, after a few mimosas at brunch and it just kind of came out. But ultimately it was a real quote from one of her real friends that inspired this entire story to begin with.
I'm gonna admit my own flight of being really, really stupid. So I only watched the 1996 one like last night. I'd never seen it before. When it came out, I was
You're talking about the
17.
live action one right now, right?
Yeah, yeah. I'm talking about live
Yeah.
action one, right? When that came out, I was like 17, so that I wasn't in the demographic for that movie. Um, but I never noticed, except they make it so obvious you can't help. It's oh yeah, Deville. Oh yeah, okay, Devil. Really? Like I never picked up on that before for some reason.
Really? So because in the cartoon it's way more obvious. Like when she goes and answers her phone, it's a literal devil's head with like the pointy red nose and the pointy beard and everything. Like it's an actual devil that her phone is. So yeah, I mean,
Oh yeah, I
yeah,
noticed that. But you see, I noticed that. Oh, that means she's kind of evil. But I didn't notice the name thing until they just
her name was literally Devil. Yeah.
because they spell it on her car and stuff in the live action with like a big D, and I was like, oh yeah. So I mean, of course, I always thought, yes, I thought of her as a devilish lass, but
Yeah.
yeah, I just last night I was like, oh my god, I didn't actually like make that connection till just now. Again, I
It's it
didn't, I haven't, I
when
don't
it's
think
so
about
on the
those things.
nose, you can't even see it because it's right there in front of your face, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Like I said, this is one of the Disneys I'm less familiar with. I haven't actually seen it since I'm a kid, so I haven't put too much thought into it anyway. But yeah, so I would just
So
seen the name written in print, basically.
well, the original story is pretty similar to how the cartoon goes anyways. There's like a few little modifications which I actually think the cartoon did it a little bit better than it would have if they just followed the book directly. So there's not a lot you're missing out if you haven't read the original book. However, what's even more interesting is that there was a sequel written to 101 Dalmatians called The Starlight Barking, and this was not adopted by Disney or anyone else because it goes a little bit off the rails. It is like the exact opposite of what you might expect from the sequel. So all of the Disney sequels that come out for Dalmatians absolutely don't follow the written sequel. And in the written sequel, all of the dogs wake up one morning and every other animal on the planet, assumingly has entered some kind of like a sleeping beauty type deep sleep. Like no one else will wake up, only the dogs wake up and a handful of cats that are there to help them. So they wake up, they can communicate through ESP with each other. So they no longer have to do the twilight bark. This is called the starlight bark. So it's like an actual, like we're talking dog to dog through just mental waves. They can fly, they can operate technology on command, also, I presumably through ESP. So, like, if they come across a mechanical gate or, a toll booth or something, they can just think their way through it and they can communicate with it. They also, a large god dog comes down from the stars called, he comes from Sirius. He's the actual star god of Sirius. And he basically tells everyone, hey, like you can all return back to me up into the sky. But when everyone wakes up, the humans will just never know dogs existed. But you can come and live with me in the stars forever. And by the way, you might want to do this because there's an oncoming nuclear war that's going to wipe out all of humanity. So, like, this Sirius dog star gives all of the dogs this last out. And the dogs like kind of think it over, and essentially they decide that they'd rather be with their masters because the chance of meeting a special human, they just can't miss out on this opportunity. And then the nuclear war never actually comes, or maybe it does, but it doesn't get into that. And I don't think she ever wrote the third version of this.
The
But just
post-apocalyptic one.
as I read over this, though, I didn't read the full book, but I skimmed it. I found like a copy online, and then I read a few different summaries of it, and it is as crazy as it sounds, which makes sense on why that particular book didn't get adopted. But oh, how I wish it did! I really think that this one would have been such an interesting story to adopt.
Yeah, it's kind of like how we need that second Forrest Gump movie where things really get off the rails. um, which I what happens in that? Actually, I guess the Starlight barking is a little bit more madness. But no, you're explaining like, well, why didn't they make that an animated movie? Somebody should. Could be like a Return to Oz situation where you like you use this property but you don't use any of the Disney specific stuff, the opposite direction of course with Return to Oz, but someone could rock that out, I think, you.
But and I mean, I was thinking too on the same kind of properties that you can make this like a horror movie quite easily by just taking the exact premise and just have Cruella de actually see it through and win. Although I think that globally it's more acceptable to skin a person and turn a person into a coat than it ever would be for dogs. At
no
least
I,
in the States.
no, I have friends that'll be perfectly happy to watch 101 slasher films, but they don't want to see like a dog die in a movie.
Or even like you want to see like a dog hurt its leg in a movie, even if you know it's animated. So
So are you a dog fur coat or a cat fur coat person? Which coat would you prefer?
I would probably go for a hypoallergenic dog coat just for practical reasons.
Yeah, that it's kind of the MacGuffin of this movie, which, like you said, if Smith, Dottie, sorry, I forgot I'll say her name already, but if she had gotten this comment from her friend, at least that's some connection with reality, because otherwise, it's like, why would you even want to do that in the first place? I mean, like she's got
It could
syphilis
also
or
be like
something.
that cute aggression though, like I could just eat you up kind of thing, or
Hmm.
like I want to just pinch your baby's cheeks right off. I mean, there was not a lot of context given because, of course, once you give context to a quote like that and then it explains it, it takes away some of the mystique. So it just sounds better that one of her friends actually, inspired this movie by this comment.
And then the voice actor, who I believe was also the live action, rotoscope reference actor, and what's her name? Get that back. Betty Lou Gerson, yes, who was in Cinderella, was it? She had done some previous voice work, but yeah, she was apparently modeling sort of after Betty Davis somewhat, and another reference. But yeah, that's why her clothes don't quite fit. Her gray skin pallor is definitely notable in this movie. Like again, makes her seem kind of demonic. I should have gotten this earlier, but
Yeah, I mean, they kind of beat you over the head with it. Like she literally has a skull for a head. Like she doesn't even have any sort of muscles or fat on her face. It's just a skull with skin on top of it.
I guess there's some red in there, but yeah, black white is sort of the main sort of vibe there with the hair. I was you said you saw the newer movie, but it's talking about they have to explain like why half her head's white and half her head's black. Again, origin stories we don't need like Hans Dice or something, but
I honestly I prefer the older one, although I don't think you could have pulled that one off in the live action remake without a lot of CGI or some interesting practical effects, which might
you
have
don't.
been kind of cool. I don't know.
Yeah, well, you don't want 1996 CGI on it for sure.
No, and there was a couple scenes that kind of ruined it for that movie too, but that they try to minimize it, so it's not too bad. And then I was wondering in both versions, maybe I just don't pay close enough attention, but it doesn't make 100% sense on where DeVille gets all of this money where she can just afford to hire random goons and then just, use all of her resources to stock puppies to turn into coats.
Well, the live action one at least paints her as sort of an executive who probably has a notable bank account because she in
Yeah,
the
she runs like a Tim Burton-esque clothing studio.
right, because in the animated one she just seems to kind of like stumble in like a vagrant almost.
Well, she almost seems like she's got that old world money because she's got like a Rolls Royce and she's already used to wearing fur. And in the book and in the original movie, Cruella de Vil's just a friend of the wife, of the main character. And that kind of tracks with the autobiography of the author. But in the movie, it's the boss, which makes a million times more sense because then you've got like the Devil Wears Prada sort of dynamic going on where you want to impress the boss. But it didn't make sense in the book and the movie, the original animation. Like, why are they even friends? They don't seem. It doesn't seem right at all that these two different people would even be in the same sphere. And I think they explain it away in the original that they were roommates or they had known each other early on, but it still doesn't make any sense why they would still be associating with each other.
Yeah, you are right. It makes more sense in the live action one, but I kind of like the insane relationship that we see in the book and animated movie. I'm like, yet like you said, it doesn't make sense, but I just liked watching that for some reason. I don't know. I guess it's because you tend to have like that bizarro friend here or there, right?
Yeah, I guess so. They spice it up a little bit. And another interesting note on Cruella de Vil is that in the Starlight Barking, the dogs decide they want to get revenge and they determine they're going to go and kill Cruella de Vil. But when they all, go to do the deed, they see that she's moved on from fur and now she collects metallic plastic items. And they decide because of that they're going to give her a break and they don't murder her, which was a
Metallic
very
and plastic,
metallic
not metallic.
plastic items, which you have to just imagine in like the 19 what 40s 30s or 40s when I think that was originally written, that maybe that was like a cool new futuristic thing is like metallic looking plastics.
Like this.
But yeah,
Oh, you can't.
that was a specific thing.
I'm holding up my little action figure gun. I'm guessing that would be the metallic plastic. I don't know. Anyway, yeah, that's a very specific thing to
It is
collect.
very specific and it saved her life. So
I'm just wondering if Dottie Smith maybe was having a I don't know, like a opioid addiction by this point, prescription drug
well,
addiction.
so I mean, funny you should mention that. I don't think that it was necessarily drugs. It might have been Jesus because I guess her mom got cancer and she got really close with her mom. And in the end of her mom's life, they both converted to Christian Science. And then from that point on, I think she was a Christian Scientist for the rest of her life. And it kind of coincides with a few like they moved to Hollywood. There's one, right? The second part is that her husband files for a conscientious objector to get out of the war. So that explains that like anti-nuclear plot line in the
Hmm.
second one. So that there's a few, and then the Christian Scientist thing, maybe that makes sense where all of a sudden everyone's got ESP and they can fly and they can just operate technology on command because that newfangled technology that's too hard to operate in those stupid punch card and abacus machines. It'll be great if you could just think your way right through it. So I don't know, a lot of those elements seem to be explained by some of those moves that she kind of made towards after she wrote that original book and it blew up and she moves to Hollywood and adapts some new ideas and makes new friends.
Ah, religion is the opiate of the masses. Okay. Seems so. Yeah, I guess you change. You have a whiplash of you're gonna get some weird wake in that whiplash. Does that make any sense? I don't know. I've never converted. So I don't get I don't get the revival spirit, I guess. But
And it would be
that,
weird too if your husband's family were Titanic survivors. It's just I don't know. It's an interesting time to grow up and an interesting set of people. And her parents were into Hollywood, so it wasn't like she just was this bumpkin that grew up in the middle of some like an English sort of shire and just wrote this book and was obscured. Like there's probably a good reason why the book we even know about and even got adopted is because she kind of grew up in like a very eccentric family and time period.
right on. I did note that one other difference. The the dog relationship is a whole lot more convoluted. Where Pongo has the Dalmatians with like a different dog or something, but and then Perida's like the stepmom or something, which seemed needlessly convoluted.
So in the book, and man, I'm not doing a dissertation, so I might have some of this wrong, but I think in the book, in addition to the original puppies that Pongo has, there's like a whole other group of Dalmatians that are just already kind of in storage that were going to be turned into coats as well. And that's where the 101 come from. They don't all come from the same dog, and I don't know if they almost imply it in the animated original movie, but he just says, they're like 101. Where'd these come from? And then the dad looks over at Pongo and he's like, Pongo, you old rascal, kind of implying that he's the one that made all of the 100 puppies over the course of, you know, well, which I think is just kind of like a maybe a tongue-in-cheek reference to the original book. But I think in the book they kind of explicitly say that it's not all from Pongo.
Oh, they do in the movie. He just has 15, right? The others are at the mansion, I believe. But he could have been a
Right, but
bad dog in the
but
past.
also in the animated movie, the owners are absolutely clueless because they still at the end of the movie don't even realize that Cruella DeVille was involved in kidnapping the dogs and was actually serious about turning them into a coat. They just kind of have like the husband has some suspicions, and that's pretty much where it stops. Whereas in like the remake movie, they no uncertainty about what she's trying to do.
Karmatically, though, that it works because he made a bunch of money, writing a parodying song with her. So, I mean, that is one thing they're talking about how he's a down and out songwriter and all that sort of stuff. Which he's something else in the book. I think in the movie he became a down and out songwriter simply so they could put a few songs in the movie. Apparently, that's what is referred to as an old theater trick. Just make him a songwriter. But I'm like, okay, they're supposed to be down and out and poor, and they have a maid. What? Huh? I guess a different
Well, I mean,
time.
yeah, come on. We're not talking poor. We just mean like, normal poor.
Yeah, old money
Which
poor.
means you still have like multiple cars and a nice mansion with like 3 stories and the resources to not only raise 100 Dalmatians, but then to say, let's buy an entire plantation just dedicated to it.
Well, he has made his Cruella song money by then. So by the end of the
The
movie, they are a
one
little more
song,
well
yeah,
off.
I guess so, but
Oh,
and the ball's on this guy to write a song about his wife's friend that she already told him to lay off, and it turns into his biggest hit.
yeah, it keeps making me think of there's the on the Tim and Eric sketch comedy show a few years back. There's the Petite Feet song, which a guy walks in with tiny feet, and then they start doing a song. Each time you watch it, it seems cooler because they're like, oh, this guy just walks into the bar and they just mercilessly start making fun of him in song form, and he's kind of into it or whatever. It's a great clip, but yeah, it's like the insult song directed at a acquaintance in your presence is kind of weird, I guess.
It leaves open some interesting dynamics though, because if there was like a spiritual successor to the animated movie, not only have they taken away this lady's main, like she was using all of her resources to do this, and now they're just taunting her and writing songs about her, and they've got every single dog back. Not a single dog succumbed to the cold or anything. We've got 100 of them. So I mean, it's
And one.
almost like they're just begging her to come in and kidnap them again, and all it would take is just hire 2 goons that are just slightly more competent, and I mean, she could at least take out a few of them. Like, not even a question, she could make a pair of shoes.
Yeah, I didn't realize that one of the goons was Tom Weasley's dad, Ron Weasley's dad. I think the actor's name's Tom, but in the live action one, excuse me. Who is the main goon again? He's someone quite
Hugh
notable in
Laurie
this.
from
Yes, thank you.
House,
Yes,
yeah,
yes. Watching
and
Doctor House
and
try
a
to be a
bunch of other
scumbag.
stuff, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, for me, Hugh Laurie's always like Blackadder is still my main thought of Hugh Laurie,
Okay.
which is like the last thing people think of now. But when I see him, I always think of Blackadder. So there's probably a few other people I do. That was a popular enough show. But yeah, I did like the casting. Jeff Daniels. Sorry, I'm skipping ahead to the live action one because I guess I watched it most recently. But yeah, this was coming. I think maybe that was another turn off. One, I was the wrong age for that when it came out, and two, I'd just seen Jeff Daniels in like Dumber and Dumber, and I didn't want to see him like in a wholesome, quirky role. So,
Well, so I mean, believe it or like I was also, because I think we're similar ages, so I was also not the demographic of the live action remake, at least. The original animation, same thing. Like it was a babysitter at some point, I'm sure. but rewatching the live action was actually a whole lot better than I was expecting it to be, or that I remembered it being. And I kind of appreciated that they didn't do the stupid "look who's talking now" animal voices. There was a few places where they might have done some kind of cheesy sound, like VO, like ooh, like they're making like sort of like baby cooing noises. But other than that, I actually really appreciated the original aspect of just having a bunch of trained animals do tricks for a majority of the movie.
Yeah, and I had forgotten that it has a John Hughes script, which is pretty trippy. And they paid him way too much money. There was like contractual problems. In the Disney War book, there's a whole bunch about this, but I think it's one of the things that got uh maybe it might have been one of the last thing Katzenberg did, which got Michael Eisner to really get pissed at him or something, paying John Hughes so much money to write this script or something. So if you read that book,
It didn't seem like
everyone's
they needed it. Like anyone could have written this script
yeah, yeah,
on
yeah. That
some
was
aspect.
exactly. So when last time I was like John Hughes wrote the script, what? That's so. And then I kind of remembered, but it's yeah. If you've read the Disney War, it's so convoluted, you can't remember what horrible thing who did the what. So I guess that's just a yeah, corporate sniping. It's a different world than hopefully most of us live in. Now in the original, of course, we got Rod Taylor, who's in the Time Machine. He's in some Twilight Zones. This is just before he actually became a name, so he is kind of just a rando voice actor here, but quickly became a yeah, the Birds. Okay, the Time Machine had already come out. He was in Inglorious Bastards. That's wild. Okay, are you familiar with him? I mean, Rod Taylor.
No, I'd have to see a picture
Okay. Have you seen the 1960 Time Machine?
of. I mean, of course, but I mean, I
Wait,
would.
he's the guy sitting in the time machine.
Okay, the main actor from it.
Yeah, he's the star. And then he's in one of my favorite Twilight Zones. I might have mentioned to you I do a Twilight Zone podcast where
Hmm.
there's and when the sky was open where the astronauts come back from Earth and just start slowly like disappearing from reality, like everyone's forgotten they existed, and he's quite good in that. So but yeah, I was just kind of happy to see that he kind of got his start in this movie.
I mean,
Let's
it seems that once people started getting into these movies, then either they would be rehired for every movie afterwards, or there was a handful that just kind of like went directly into obscurity, and it was like the only and last thing that they did.
yeah, because now it's just like an animated Disney movie usually has to have like some all-star lineup, which is probably a bad idea most of the time. Of course, there's a few actors that can nail it on stage and end screen, but on stage,
So,
sorry,
well,
not
since you bring
voice
that up, and
acting
the
and
new
live action.
so we're on a little bit of a tangent though, but the new Avatar movie just came out recently, and there's a very similar dynamic to that too, where they're hiring big budget movie actors, but then just like painting them blue and then putting the stupid little motion tracking balls on their face and then having a moat and then do the VO. But it feels like such a missed opportunity to just have like random people that just are better at making facial expressions that might not who know who they are. It's just weird that like we still are expecting movie stars to play roles that we don't even see them in.
Yeah, I've heard several people after a movie be like, yeah, Kate Winslet was in it. What? Kate Winslet what was in it? What? Where?
Why?
Why? It's a good question.
Yeah.
Now I found just while we're on that movie, I did see it, and I feel like will people like it? One is, did you like what did you think of the first Avatar? That's what you're going to think of the second Avatar, and the
Okay,
other
fair enough. Fair enough.
and the other I've seen that is both praise and criticism is the second hour of the movie is just snorkeling. So
It's just live action snorks.
yeah, yeah, yes, in 3D. So if that sounds fantastic, you'll love the movie. If you're like, no, that sounds way too long, it should have been shorter, then maybe it's not for you, right? I love snorkeling. I was down for that. So, I'm like, oh, the plot's not really going anywhere. We're just looking at like the space fish. That's cool.
To be honest, if a movie's longer than 90 minutes, I'm guaranteed to fall asleep. And at the first Avatar, the first Lord of the Rings, like I saw all these on opening day in like a packed theater, and I fell asleep in every single one of them around the 50-minute mark or so. So
Yeah.
unfortunately, I feel like that would be the same destiny for me watching the new Avatar.
Yeah, I usually stick by that rule. Some 3D keeps me awake. I did fall asleep in The Hobbit, the animated Tintin, both after work too. So maybe I shouldn't have gone after
To
work.
be the 3D maybe is worse for me because now the so like having to keep up the social appearance of your eyes being open is gone once that you have the not only do you have the glasses on to hide that your eyes are closed, but everyone else is so engrossed in like the 3D aspect that it's only the snores that really give me away at that point.
Yeah. The one, so I didn't shed too many tears over those two movies, but yeah, I went to see the new Bond film also after. Well, it's not that new now, but a year and a half ago, and I did take a notable nap in the middle of it, and then had a podcast about it the next day. So, oops, I was like, had to go back read the week. And go, what the fuck happened to that movie?
It
Not a
happens to
bad
the best of us.
movie. Not my favorite Bond by any means, by either. But
But
it's not.
on that same note, now whenever I watch a movie, so when I started the original animated 101 Dalmatians and it pops up, I'm like, okay, yeah, an hour and 19 minutes and give or take 10 minutes for the opening and ending credits. Like that sounds very agreeable to me. And then when I started watching the 96 live action remake, I'm like, oh, an hour and 45 minutes. Like, all right, let's do it. Like they're just a little bit takes the wind out of it for me. And that's definitely a change in how I used to feel because I used to love like, oh yeah, a 3 hour movie. Why would you ever want to watch a 90-minute movie? It sounds like such a throwaway, but man, like, give me a 60-minute movie. Give me a
Yeah.
50-minute.
No, I got a. I was watching Casino while going to sleep a few nights ago, and I think I got about 50 minutes in awake, and then woke up and it's like 1:30, and something mad is happening on the screen. I'm like, well, what? The most fun is I have the 60s Batman on disc, so sometimes I'll put that on late at night, kind of fall asleep, and then wake up, and then the plot's kind of like in the same place, but now it's like a different villain because
It's the
it's like
same with
three
the
episodes.
old Superman. The black and white Superman show is almost identical. You kind of fall asleep. You're like, oh, now they're in Africa, like turning coal into diamonds with his hands. And you fall asleep. Oh, now they're in Paris. Whatever.
Oh,
It's
see,
kind of like the same plot.
well, no, a little different because in Batman they're always in Gotham City, and basically the same plot's happening. It's 3 episodes down the line that I slept through, so it's just a different villain. But the story actually seems to make sense because it's got the same story for every 2 episodes. So that's kind of fun. I was kind of enjoying that. Um, Taking a look, I guess I should go back to the animated one. I'm looking through my notes for things.
Well,
Let's see.
I one of the cool things too is that instead of making the guy a musician again and writing songs, they make him of what they say is a video game designer in what Disney says a video game designer is in 1996. But the things that he's doing are like not very video game designery. And he also lives in an interesting smart home. I guess you could call it a smart home because he's got like a computer that says hello to the dog when the dog wakes up, and then there's like a little button that's rigged to the side of the door that's also connected to the computer. So they kind of make him seem like he's this technical whiz, but there's nothing else to back it up aside from that little opening sequence and then just saying that he designs video games.
Well, I should note that the technology we're seeing in his game is pretty much what Disney was going to put up to the plate a year later when they opened Disney Quest. And that same technology you could go enjoy until about 2016.
Maybe, although I mean I've been to Disney Quest many times because it was right by where I was working for the longest time. But there was the Aladdin ride, which I think was ahead of its time. But the animation that they're showing in the movie, as if it were the video game that they were playing, there was not a single device on the planet that could have played it at the resolution that they were talking about in or outside of Disney Quest until maybe very recently, like when Cuphead came out. So I guess the latest versions of maybe like PS4 or slightly earlier, where you could actually have that like cell animated look. But yeah, like the animated look, but it was also interesting because the crux of the game was just on how scary the bad guy was. Like there was no gameplay aspect to it. The only feedback that their one video game expert person gave them was just that they needed to feel like they wanted to annihilate the bad guy. So he spends the entire movie trying to brainstorm the perfect villain for a video game as opposed to the perfect lyrics to some song. So they kind of tie in the same dynamic where the guy's using Cruella de Vil as the influence to like sell their big thing and hit it big. But this one made a little bit more sense, but also he seemed like just the worst video game designer. The game looked horrible. The graphics would have been interesting, but the game looked like it was
The
garbage.
backgrounds all look like, yeah, I was about to say this game would have gone like head to head with Superman 64, you know, which
Well, and it reminded me a lot of, I don't remember the show Nick Arcade, where they would put like the kids inside of the video games on like a green screen. But also right before they did that, they had these really cheap like shareware style platformer games that they would have them play head to head and just earn points. And there was a few that looked really similar to having this kind of like cell animated look to it. So yeah, it reminded me of Nick Arcade. Like if Nick Arcade actually had some kind of fidelity, it would have been this Dalmatian game that Jeff Bridges was working on that looked like it sucked.
it was kind of the backgrounds that were really making me think, because the front, the cell stuff, I was like, oh, there's referencing the animated movie, that's cool. So I was kind of looking at
Mhm.
the back and thinking, oh, that looks like digital garbage from the mid 90s. But yeah, the cell part for sure. um Something interesting about the 1960 movie is, and yeah, this is definitely the first Disney movie that acknowledges television, because the others are a little more fairy tale-ish. I don't think Lady and the Tramp is set in like 1908. So yeah, this is the first
Yeah,
time we
you're
get
right. That's
television
interesting.
mentioned, and we get
And
the
it's cool
weird.
too because they add like a little sepia tone and like a vintage effect even to the animation, even though it itself now is like a vintage animation. So it was had a meta aspect to it for sure.
And that was my whole point. This is the first time with Disney really getting meta, because they have these fake commercials, which were quite enjoyable, and that's where they got one of the songs in the movie. And it's kind of just funny how they like some of the original reviews, and in the reviews again, it was more positively reviewed than I thought it was when it first came out. But some of the reviews were like, oh, it doesn't quite have enough music, because they were used to the older Disney movies, which would usually have one or two more songs, where this basically just has that jingle, the Cruella de Vil song. And
And they try to sneak one in at the very end about
right,
the
that's when,
Dalmatian
right,
plantation. Yeah.
which was a fully composed song that simply didn't make it to the movie in its full form. I mean, I guess now
It
you'd play it
wasn't
over
as
the
much of an
ending
earwig.
credits.
The first one was more of an earwig, and just the melody was a great one for the Cruella de Vil song.
Yeah, it might have been a one hit wonder. So
Yeah,
as long as the
I think it
royalties keep
was. Yeah.
coming in. So, but yeah, because I mean, movies have gotten so like, meta now. Oh, that just happened. So I just thought it was interesting that this kind of seems to be the first time we get a little bit of meta creeping in. And not as in the Facebook thing, of course, as in the use of the word. It's hard to use that word now. That and quantum, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they're just gonna own every single word and like Latin sort of derivative. You won't even be able to put your own words together because they're gonna own all the roots.
We were watching the Bates Motel TV show, and I was like sitting there. When was Psycho the movie the first time that term was used? And I went looking. And before I went looking, I was like, wait a minute, it's a Greek word. Well, a little different. Actually, I did learn. It's like Psycho with a K, I think. So maybe the Hitchcock movie is the first time
Hmm.
we just started using it with the CHO spelling, and calling that guy a psycho. So
Well, I mean, how depends on how deep you want to get on that one, but that one was just because psychology and like the introspection kind of came from Jung and some of like the German and Austrian philosophers and psychiatrists, and then from them the concept of psychology kind of came out with like Freud, right? So a lot of it was kind of this Eastern European mentality. So a lot of it was spelt with the K in like almost like an Austrian, German, Swiss source, but as soon as it hopped over and came into America, then it kind of like dropped that and got the C.
because
It became anglicized.
right, because one of the recent Twilight Zones I looked at, which I guess had an early 1961 air date, so they wouldn't have necessarily seen Psycho yet. Had that guy's psychological. And I was like, oh, it's kind of weird to say it that way. Like that guy's
Interesting
crazy,
note
that guy's
too
psychological.
about the Psycho movie. That famous shower scene was actually based on a earlier movie from I want to say it was like earlier than 42, might have been 38 or 39, but it was a movie called The Seventh Victim, and that actually had the OG shower scene that then got kind of, ended up inspiring the shower scene from Psycho that became way more famous.
Right, right. Well, they got the editing snap, which I haven't seen the original. Maybe it's better. I don't know, but
No, I mean,
there might be a little more finessing on the newer one. But yeah, so just to segue it, I guess Cruella is pretty much a proper psycho. It's aimed towards dogs, but like you said, that in a way could be worse. Although I guess she's just making power moves, like you said, old money power moves. Because
I
yeah,
guess, although a lot of it doesn't make sense. So the only thing that explains all the plot gaps in any of the stories, like the remake and the old one, and we're gonna ignore the latest Cruella movie, but in the '96 remake and the original animation, it doesn't make sense that you'd have all these resources, especially if you had your own clothing company that was doing well enough that you could hire an entire staff and a potentially an assistant that was somewhat competent, but then in your personal life hire just the biggest bumbling idiots. And not just that, but why wouldn't you just buy one Dalmatian, or a male and female Dalmatian, and just breed them yourselves, and you've got an endless supply of coats.
she doesn't
And
want to
they're
live with
just
the dogs.
right, but she had the abandoned place that the guys went and took him to in both instances, right? So like she clearly had the property to raise them on and had the two idiots to do the whole thing. So I mean, there's that aspect, and then also the fact that she expects, either in the live action version where she herself is going to go and somehow take all 100 puppies back and skin them personally, or in the animated movie where she expects her two henchmen to kill and skin all 100 of them overnight. Both of those are very unrealistic expectations of someone you'd probably expect to be a psychopath. Yeah.
I was when I was watching it, I did think of the Twilight Bark being like the early version of the Orange Alert that we have now. When a kid goes missing in the city or something, you have the Orange Alert.
Yeah.
So I was
Yeah.
like,
Amber. Yeah. We get the Amber alerts. Yeah.
they should. Oh, maybe Amber. Sorry, it's been a
And then
while
and
since
it's
I've done
Silver
face, but
Alert if grandpa wanders away from hospice, they'll call that a Silver Alert.
okay. I want to turn that to the Twilight Bark, like in real life.
Honestly, dude, like just skip forward to the ESP and flying like that, and just controlling technology with your mind.
Yeah, keep track of your kids using mind powers. Well, I guess some people have kind of done that. So
But also, I mean, there's no other animal that's awake, right? So humans aren't around to hit you with cars. There's no other predators whatsoever. And again, you can fly at super fast speeds. You can communicate through ESP. So it almost seems like it would be the ultimate utopian paradise. So there's no danger whatsoever. I guess, right? Unless you just like overate yourself, or you found like the chocolate factory and the dogs got into the chocolate. But otherwise, there's no natural predators around, and you've just got your free reign of the entire planet. So I still want that movie to be made.
oh, for sure. I don't know why they made 102 Dalmatians when they had that source material. So in either version, I think there's a live action one and an animated one. If I mean both made in around 2000. Yeah.
I couldn't find copies in time. I wanted to. And there was also a documentary made on the making of the animated film that I wasn't able to find a copy of. But after watching the '96 live action remake, and I feel horrible saying this because I'm an animation lover at heart, but I feel like out of the two, I'm more interested in the making of the real one than of the animated one, just because of how many different trained animals they needed. It just seems like that would have been such a cooler experience than just watching like 20 people scan things in Xerox machines for 3 years on end.
Yeah, and all the you get all the design elements with the live action. So here you get a cool devil phone, but someone drew that, right? You don't really need to
Yeah,
see the
the
making
Devil
of it.
phone was a huge highlight. The Cruella Deville design was a huge highlight. And I liked seeing someone draw. I don't know if you saw all 100 on screen at one point, but there was a lot of drawing going on, and I'm sure it was not fun. And I'm glad I wasn't part of any of the production, but it's interesting to see.
Maybe in the Death March you get all 100 at some point, or no, I'm thinking no,
Fantasia might be a good exception to the rule here.
yeah, yeah. No, I was just thinking, didn't we see a shot of all the dogs coming into town? But I was like, no, that was Gremlins, which I watched for Christmas. This is the first film that I think, not the first, but yeah, Watt was really out by this point. He apparently was in on story meetings, but I assume he was probably starting to think about Epcot by this point and not thinking about the movies so much, making that
When
big map for Epcot. Yeah.
and I don't know if this was just part of his business acumen and it was just something that he always did, but he also bought the rights to at least one of this lady's, Dodie Smith's, one of her other books. But they never actually produced it, and it took the longest time. And I think finally in like 2016 or something, like UPN, or no, sorry, it was like BBC ended up making a direct to video or like a TV based movie on one of her other books. But man, Disney just sat on that script for decades.
Yeah. I'm sitting here looking also. I guess Disney himself wasn't so satisfied with this film when it came out. Ken Anderson is the art director who really got the Xerox rolling. Um, and yeah, it says Watts said we're never going to have one of those goddamn things again, referring to Dalmatians and its technique, and stated Ken's never going to be an art director again. So
Yeah.
the man himself was not really into this, though apparently he basically apologized to the guy on his deathbed a few years later. So,
Wonder, was he ever an art director again, or did
oh,
those
that
words actually damn him?
oh, I should check that. He certainly had a few years that I guess he was a director and writer at Walt Disney Animation. Okay, he did the Jungle Book. They let him back in. Jungle
Okay.
Book's after Walt dies, though, right? So it would have been in progress before that, for sure, though.
That sounds like such a Walt thing though, like that going in and publicly declaring like, yeah, I hated the art director, I'm never gonna hire him again. That's like just a classic Walt Disney type of move.
Oh no, he's straight in on Sword in the Stone, or though maybe he was already doing that because then it's Jungle Book's just story. It seems. Yeah, actually, he doesn't. He's not listed as a full art director again until 1977's Pete's Dragon, accepting Sword of the Stone, which was probably already in production. So yeah, he's just a story guy between. So I guess there was some truth to those words. I don't know.
That Disney kiss of death.
Yeah, really. Because this is the one that's notorious for having so many Xeroxed Dalmatians, of course. And when we see they kept using the technology, but I guess not to this degree. I'm trying to think of another time pre CGI where we would have seen like just extensive Xeroxing. I don't think the Rescuers or Robin Hood. I'm sure they have the Xeroxing, but maybe not so obvious.
Again, I mean, this one, with the context of watching it and knowing that this was the first time that they were experimenting with this new technique, and having seen all of the previous older ones right before we watched this one, it really still feels like amazing, especially for the time. But I guess I like seeing like the rough edges sometimes. It definitely lacks a little bit of polish in some of the animation sequences. But also, this might be like the horrible thing for movie purists, but for the some of these in the scenes, I'll watch it at like 1.5x or one, as much as I can handle still listening and having the intelligible sort of dialogue. But once you start playing at those faster animation speeds, man, the older animation looks great because it's running at like 30 frames a second instead of 12 frames a second or 15.
Oh, I should have done that because I actually did watch the newer one at slightly faster speed just because of time. And I do that sometimes, but I watched
It's weird
the
in live
animated
action.
one.
Live
I
live action gives it that weird soap opera look, but if you do it for animation, it just makes it look so much sharper.
Okay, I completely did it the wrong way then.
Yeah.
I watch animation normal speed and the live action one slightly faster. But again, I'm used to that. Like 2 years ago, I'd see my parent-in-laws downstairs watching like Korean dramas at double speed. I'm like, why are you doing that? You're not even enjoying the thing properly. But once I started doing a lot of podcasts, sometimes, especially when it's like an educational film or something, it's like double speed. So I guess I
Well,
get it
it's so
now.
much easier to speed something up than it would ever be to slow it down. Because if someone's talking really fast, even if you slow it down, it's a little bit harder to understand. But if someone just talks really slow, it just makes it so easy to speed it up, and you can get used to it within minutes.
What I love is on my phone, listening to podcasts. Sometimes I'll start the podcast and I've accidentally like hit the half speed or something. So suddenly everyone sounds touched. It's like, oh, I was. It's like, what's wrong with them? Oh, it's my phone that's wrong with them. Okay, that's good. They didn't just get like a severe trauma blow to the head or something. I was thinking one reason maybe this doesn't seem like, because it kind of is one of the big Disney movies, but someone like me who doesn't watch it regularly might feel that way because it doesn't. I don't think it's ever had the theme park presence, has it? Peter Pan's got the rides, got the
um
characters in the park.
yeah, no, that's a great question. I do know that Disney World in Orlando, they have their own little like fire department. It's very Dalmatian heavy themed. Although I don't know if they draw direct examples between 101 Dalmatians.
I'm just sitting here trying to think of like what would I make a 101 Dalmatians theme park attraction? Yeah, like this and Lady and the Tramp would be real difficult to make an attraction for those sorts of things.
No, the
Uh,
big one is you just sell a bunch of stuffed Luckies and stuffed Rollies. That's
oh
where the
yeah,
money's at, anyways.
oh yeah, that's a good one. I don't know. Could you have like a car chase or a it's not
Again,
really
it's
exciting
weird
enough.
because the whole premise is that if you don't get away, they're gonna kill and skin your dog. So maybe it's just hard to work like a ride around. Like that lady back there is literally skinning our dog.
Maybe you're going through the abandoned house, but there's like it's like a little bit of a haunted house quality where it's like knives coming down, like you are the dog, right? And the knives are
Yeah.
coming through, like so you're in danger of getting skinned. Children under 8 would be very traumatized. Yeah, yeah, it could be the scariest ride at Disney. Cruella de Vil's just peering down at you, sort of like the
I
alien
mean,
in that
and
movie
again,
ride.
man, I mean, just to keep this nice and light, since that's where we're at already. But you just change the species of animal, and it's literally just like an actual slaughterhouse where they make shoes and coats. You know, you just change it from a dog into a cow, and then bam, like now it's real. Like it's no longer a movie plot. It's just someone went to work that day.
Well, they almost did that in Disney's America, where they were going to have a roller coaster go through like a steel mill. Not so much death and gore there. Or how about this? So we can keep it a little Disney. So in the ride, like you're a person. You're not like a Dalmatian. It's not like um what was it where you didn't see the character? Um the original version of Snow White. You never see Snow White because you're supposed to be Snow White. So like you're supposed to be the perspective of Snow White on the original ride. So they had to change it because everyone was just confused. They're like, "Where's Snow White? She's not on the ride." No, you are Snow White. So in the Dalmatians ride, you would be the humans, and there are Dalmatians trying to skin you. So you really understand their pain now or their trauma.
It would come off better than the Snow White ride for sure. Because I also was very confused by that as a kid.
There's a few that seem to be like the kind of the MO an original like around the time 101 Dalmatians came out. It was kind of like, oh, you are the main character in the ride going through these experiences. So um I don't know if I think by Pinocchio they'd figured out not to do that anymore. But yeah, it is kind of weird. Like, yeah, because everyone's just like, where's the character then? I'm confused.
I mean, but also your only other option was to like stay at home and listen to the radio. So
Yeah, yeah, Dark Ride's more exciting than that, I guess. Um the different number of accents in this one was kind of boggling. I mean, it makes sense from like it's a kids movie. Well, I don't know, Disney movies, I guess, is a family movie. It's for everybody. But yeah, yeah, we have like the Dalmatians themselves. Some of them sound kind of Britishish, and some of them sound kind of American. And you're like, how did that happen?
and
Who's the
aside
real
from
father?
Hugh Laurie being in it, and then aside from like one or two shots where they show Big Ben and some of like the city skyline, it really feels like it's happening in America. I mean, that's as an American watching it in America, it feels like it's happening there, but it didn't feel like it you had any kind of like unique location aspect to it for sure. It happened anywhere you feel like it happened.
Yeah, yeah, because I guess Jeff Daniels is supposed to be an expat or whatever. I'm sitting here thinking of what is Jolie Richardson's actual nationality? Because I remember from Nip Tuck where she was definitely doing an American voice. So
Well, and Glenn Close is playing an American too.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Good. Oh yeah, yeah. Weird stuff there. Okay. Let's see where Jolie's from. There she is. Okay. She hails from. Dun, 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 dun. Okay, she is born London, England. Okay, so she's doing the proper accent and was faking
Yeah,
it
that's
when I
canon.
faking it in other movies I've seen.
So as much as I also wanted to credit just like the cool, I guess they're not practical effects, but like the trained animal scenes, I love that because it made it a little bit unique. And I'm kind of glad it didn't have the voices, even though I kind of liked Milo and Otis and I liked Homeward Bound with the voices, but I like just seeing animals do the tricks. I guess I'm really simple in that way. And on that same simple note, there's a point in the live action remake where one of the dogs like pees on a magazine and then they slip in the pee, and I don't know, that delighted me. I liked it, and I felt a little embarrassed for liking it so much because then immediately after, one of the goons, I guess, is checking to see if something's wrong with the car, and they imply that the way he checked to see if the car was okay by sticking his head right up to the tailpipe, and it like blew it over. And I just made a note that, some of the jokes here are just childish, and then I looked at my note above that was like, I like it when they slip in the pee. So I
Oh yeah,
guess.
I remember I have a few fully stupid notes here. I wrote I want to steal puddles. That's not that was fun. Just I guess it was the pronunciation of the movie. Um, let's see. I was assuming Master had ganja in his pipe because he's a musician. Yeah. Where else do you get a
There's
gorilla
something
to do
too
a song?
that I like about seeing classic cartoons where the characters smoke or drink. Just because it happens so much less now. That I don't know, it feels like it's dating it in like a cool way. Like they make smoking cool again because it's in this old animated movie.
Of course, now we have like they'll have stills where of course you just airbrush or CGI out the
Hmm.
cigarettes in people's hands. So I think even some of the Get Back promo materials for the Beatles one, I think in the pictures maybe they got rid of it. Of course, in the movie they didn't because that's just not realistic or whatever. So
The movie came with a pack of cigarettes
yeah,
and
yeah,
some
it
weed.
should have. Yeah, yeah, it was second for sure. Uh, sorry, I had a thought about. I lost that thought, but I will go really back to Jolie Richardson. I also noticed when I was on her page that she is Vanessa Redgrave's daughter, which I did not know. So it's kind of interesting. Dirty dogs, all that stuff. I'm having a look on my notes. I might be through my basic thoughts. This isn't one that has like the. I mean, it's got movie magic, but I guess it doesn't have too much magic unless you want to like give me something I totally missed.
Well, there's a little bit of magic in that. I mean, let's ignore the 101 Dalmatian part. Let's just go on the first 15 in the first litter, and that these puppies all make this like huge trek through the snow, and they're, living among soot and being cared after by criminals. But even in that first litter delivery, it seems very statistically unlikely that every one of the 15 would make it through, not just birth, but then everything else that happens to them. I mean, it would, if it was just a little bit more realistic, it just becomes a very sad movie immediately, because now you're talking about at least a handful of dead puppies within, a couple months time lapsed.
And
So I consider that movie magic.
what was up with the maid anyway? She's like, "Here, let me show you your dead puppy first. Let's
Well,
start
and
with
in
the
the
dead one."
cartoon, it almost feels like she was throwing him like a softball, like, oh, Masters, that hasn't been feeling great. There's this puppy that's probably dead, but he could probably, if I just like bump it, it'll come back to life, but I'll let him do this. Cause she almost gives it to him and like smiles about it and like skirts off. And then in the movie, and again, maybe it's just because Disney doesn't want like that somber, like, here's a dead puppy I'm handing you. But even in the movie, she kind of just like hands it off to him very matter of factly and just kind of like walks away. So it feels very low risk in both scenario. but I can't imagine any other outcome where like what is it, like the first 10 minutes or 15 minutes opening and there's already a dog, like a puppy that they kill on screen. There's just no way that that works in a Disney movie.
No, I mean they can't really be like, well, 98 puppies made it in the end because they went through a death march on the snow, and
Yeah.
that's pretty good odds. But
Really didn't make it.
I mean, I guess it's not that long of a death march, but still, yeah, little puppies, they're not all making it. Sorry, if you get like 70% back, that's you're doing pretty good. And 84 new puppies is not a good Christmas present, which I think we've already alluded to a bit anyway. But
Yeah, I mean that's logistically that sounds like that is now your life. Like you're now the Dalmatian people for the rest of your life.
well, they are getting a plantation, so I guess they're owning it. I just I just have this one little note that when Scotland Yard fails, you need the animal farm. So
Yeah, and it's interesting that Scotland Yard would give a shit about the, or would care at all about these people's kind of mutts, right? Like, oh, so great, you've got this unneutered dog and an unfixed female, and they're just making hundreds of puppies. Yeah, like we're gonna look into that. We're gonna look into the people that are stopping you from doing that.
we're gonna prioritize that. We got 5 people on it right now, man.
People go to jail for that all the time here in the States for hoarding animals. I mean, technically it's animal abuse, and I don't see how two people could ever take care of 100 different puppies without one of them getting stuck behind the couch and, stinking the place up after a month.
Oh, here's an interesting thing in Japan. I don't know if it's the same in the States, but I think they passed a law 2 years ago where basically all pets are now chipped. So you'd be able to find the Dalmatians real fast, but it's just kind of creepy.
Yeah, I don't know if it's actually a law, but if it's definitely looked down on if you don't have it chipped. But yeah, there's definitely like you wouldn't be required to have your animal chipped.
Okay, yeah, I think they've gotten to the requirement phase here,
Hmm.
which has kind of
I
a
think we
funky
just have
smell
too
about it.
damn many here.
Yeah, because I mean, I don't know. In Japan, it's like, hey, let's start chipping the people. Yeah, Japan would probably just be like, yeah, sure, whatever. Which, you know,
I mean, on that topic though, I don't think that you need chips. I mean, who doesn't have a phone?
yeah,
So
we
like,
carry
there's
them
there's a
around with
chip.
us.
Yeah.
The pets don't do that. So, because every once in a while, I think I'll keep my phone off for a while, and then like, I need to send a message. So yeah, we're all talking about opioid addictions, the opioid of the phones. So
I mean, they're smart. Put your chip right next to your crack, right? Your little crack pipe that you keep in your pocket all day.
all right, yeah. 2 for 1 special. Are there any big points, other points you want to throw out on this particular flick?
No. Again, they're both interesting watches. I would much prefer to have seen either of these over Lady and the Tramp, any version. Um, and I appreciate not having lots of music. And I realize that probably puts me in a certain niche of Disney movie watchers, but yeah, I liked it. I liked the animation. I liked the reuse and the sloppy looks, and even the freaking live action remake. Although the one thing that the live action remake could have absolutely done without was this stupid scene where the dogs are like riding down a little tunnel and they've got that classic 1996 CGI that just takes you completely out of it. And it just makes absolutely no sense that they spent all that money on, actual dog trainers and had actual dogs and throughout the entire movie, except for a cumulative 20 seconds of horrible CGI. Yeah, so it just stood out so glaringly. And I just wonder if maybe they could just like retouch that up or just cut it out of future versions or if it's just canon now. That's just part of it.
It's canon. It's part of the dogs verse now. So
It's easily the worst part of the whole movie, by far.
and they were thinking about having the puppies singing a song as they leave Hell Hall, and that got clipped. I think it might
That
have
would
been
have been even
written.
worse.
Yeah, so they did you a solid there because I guess the music's pretty much baked into this movie, and like we said, there's not that much of it. It's in the commercial. He's actively writing the songs. So that's how they enter the movie. That seems reasonable enough. Um,
And also, I want to think in 1996. I don't know if Disney had put out a single good video game at this point either. So the fact that they have a video game designer in their movie, um, it seems like anything that might have came out of this in terms of video game ancillary products would have been an absolute nightmare for the next decade.
that 2 decades. That's why we're out Disney Quest.
Yeah, that's right.
And I went to Disney Quest. I think it was 2009 or 2010. And but our express purpose of going there was because they had all the retro games. They had like what 2 floors of like real old school games. So we weren't
Yeah, yep.
really there for the VR experience, because if we had gone there for that, we would have been like horribly disappointed. We did some of that stuff because it was there. I think Aladdin gave me a headache or made me nauseous or something, but yeah. So we did some of that stuff. We did the bumper cars. That was fun. But yeah, we our main goal for being there was all the retro gaming, which was very cool. And there was some, oh, I'd have to ask my boy. There was some game where it's like that was like the only place that existed at that point in time. So we were on a very geeky. It was a sad. We had a satisfying journey to Disney Quest, which I haven't heard too many people say.
Well, one of the games that they had there too, I think ended up going to Vegas somewhere, but it was one of the first. They called it virtual reality, but really you just put like a little goggles in front and it had, a screen close to your eyes. But it was a multiplayer arcade game that 4 different people all played a different role. And I think you were trying to like either avoid getting assassinated by this big robot, or you had to work together to kill this big robot. And it was straight out of the 90s, like it had like lawnmower man style 3D graphics, but it was legitimately like a really interesting thing that you wouldn't see anywhere else.
Yeah, so we can thank Jeff Daniels for designing all of that, I
Yeah, thank you,
guess.
Jeff Daniels.
um, well, we close it up for today. So this should be, I guess, mid-February ish. Anything going on with you about that time?
We've got a whole bunch of new comics in the works, and hopefully we'll be about halfway done with a new Paranoid pamphlet. My original one you can see at mkultracomic.com, and that's a little pamphlet in the style of Chick Tracks, and it explains the whole backstory of the CIA's top secret MK Ultra program. And the next pamphlet that we're working on now is the whole backstory and history of homunculi, which is the plural form of a homunculus, and it explains where they come from, who originally wrote about them, and it even includes some recipes from ancient grimoires on how to make your own.
And
So
more
that one
about
I'm pretty
dogs.
excited. Yeah.
That's fun. So, oh yes, I was going to ask you, what is your favorite Chick track?
I have to go with a classic. There's one called The Beast, and the cover just has like an all-American family, nuclear family, husband, wife, brother, sister, but they all have like upside down crosses on their heads. And it just talks about just various Satan, everything is Satan. And then there's another really good one that's about trick or treating, and I think it's called Trick or Treat, and it just talks about like the pagan origins of Halloween. Just a hand. I mean, we can go off on a long list of some of my absolute. There's a fairly newer one called Virtual Reality, which
Ooh.
explains that the escapism of virtual reality headsets represent sort of like a satanic departure from God and the world. So obviously they always have that very hardcore fundamentalist Christian vibe to them. So like no matter what you're doing, if it's not praying, then Satan's got a hold of you and you have to repent. So that's
Yeah,
kind of the ongoing theme.
my favorite. I think it might just be Angels or the Blue Angels or something like that. But it's the one with the rock band that signs up with Lou Cipher. I picked that one up faster than Cruella
Loose. Yeah,
Deville.
okay, yeah. They have
And
to really smack you over the head with it, don't they?
and when they're on stage, it shows them singing their song, which is like, "We're gonna rock, rock, rock with the rock," is the lyric to their song. But the best is one of them goes into a gay marriage, and um the manager is like, "I'll give you a wedding present, some AIDS." So then the guy like dies of AIDS or whatever. So
Yet, man, if you look into the band Chick Track, like there's some Chick Tracks that even Jack T Chick died a while ago, And now it's in like the hands of like the third or fourth person that's been running it now. But there's some books that even the chick publications company doesn't even acknowledge anymore that exists.
It's that
And
my favorite's one of those. Yes.
yeah, I don't want to repeat what some of the topics are, but some of them are absolutely beyond dark. And the because if you think about it, a lot of his audience were, people that were, fundamentalist Christians, but also prisons. So he appealed a lot to some of like the worst things you could imagine someone may be in prison for. And there was a pamphlet that would pretty much line up with whatever vice you might have found yourself having, and then a pamphlet telling you that, Jesus forgives you for it. Just, go to church next time and buy a bunch of these pamphlets and give them to all your friends.
I'm just happy I was introduced to them properly, being handed one or more on the University of Georgia's campus. So got
And
the
how old were you at that point?
like 18, 19. I mean, it's already
Okay, okay.
hysterical. No, that vintage we just had, this would have been like 98, 99, and yeah, we had a whole lot of fundamentalists just like doing stump speeches around the university and stuff. I have a feeling that maybe that still happened. It's the deep south. I don't know.
Well, I found my first one in 2001 on a payphone on a military base. And I had no idea what I was looking at. It didn't seem funny. It seemed interesting. Mine was, I think it was called Bad Bob or Big Bad Bob. And it was about this biker that had all these tattoos, and he went to jail for like killing somebody, but he finds God in jail. When he comes back out, he doesn't want to hang out with his old biker friends anymore, and they like make fun of him and stuff. But it was basically about this guy, Bad Bob. And when I found out, I was like, man, this is kind of like a cool thing that I hadn't seen before. And it took me years until I started seeing other ones, and I realized, oh, there's a very specific theme here. But I mean, this is such an interesting little niche topic, but it's a comic book. By all definition, it is absolutely a comic book. But because it's fundamentalist Christian, it doesn't get the same credentials as if it were about, like a counterculture or like a snarky thing. People would call it a comic book. But if you define it as a comic book, it is the most prolific comic series that humanity has ever seen. The both in volume of print, but also just the amount of storylines that were self-written and produced and created by one person, and the number of languages that any comic book has been put out on the face of the planet. So like it would just break so many rules within the comic industry that at this point they can never acknowledge Chick Tracts as being actual comic books, because he would just start taking all these awards and it just doesn't mesh. Like the fundamentalist Christian crowd and the current sort of hardcore comic nerd crowd does not have a very tight Venn diagram.
I hope I haven't seen this one. I hope there's a chick track showing you about the evils of comic books or something.
Oh, I think that would be too self-aware. I think that one might be a little bit over the line, but man, that's an interesting one. I mean, because Jack Chick loved comics and loved draw. I mean, that was his entire life. So I don't think they would be that much of a self-incriminating thing, but it would be an interesting one to find.
He can sacrifice what he loves most in the name of Jesus. It's kind.
And I don't know if you know this, he actually had a series of legit color comic, like the regular sized comics and panels. They just were so much more expensive to produce and ship and resell that they never really took off. They were called Crusader comics.
I
And just
was
like
aware of those, and I never
okay.
read one because that's not what I want from this.
No, and yeah, and but to me they were just beyond fascinating, and I found them when I was in my 20s, knowing who Jack Chick was at that point, so I knew what I was going to be in store for. But I actually have a really good friend that grew up with these Chick tracks being given to him at church, and then his parents would go to like the Christian bookstore and buy him Crusader comics at like age 8 or 9 and give it to him, be like, read this is important, and also it's a really cool comic book. So like it didn't go in with that kind of like, oh, what a funny, silly thing, I'm a 20-year-old and I'm gonna go and drink a beer and laugh about this. But imagine coming across Chick Tracts and Crusader comics at like age 8, 9, 10, and that's the media that you're consuming. It's such a different sort of mentality.
Just one more tangent on that tangent. Did you ever make it to the Holy Land experience? in
I
Orlando.
didn't. I drove by it thousands of times, because I had to drive by it on my way to Disney at least twice a day. And then every job that I had until very recently also brought me right by that. And I missed that I didn't, but I saw a Bill Maher documentary that wasn't a very good documentary, but he goes to the Holy Land experience, and I feel like I vicariously saw enough of it through his documentary that I never actually how to pay money to go inside. A fun fact is that in order for the Holy Land experience to get some sort of a tax break and maintain that they were like a religious, church oriented thing, they had to make 1 or 2 days out of the year like a free, anyone can come, and entrance is open for the public type of thing. And when they did that, it absolutely decimated that entire area. Like, you couldn't park anywhere because all the parking lots and all the businesses around the Holy Land experience were taken up by people that wanted to go in for free that day. And it was just kind of like an unknown thing that, you weren't getting anything done on that side of town if it was one of those free days that they only had for a stupid tax break reason.
Yeah, I guess the sort of thing where you don't want to go there till you can't. While it's there, it's like, oh God, no. But
Yeah.
once it's gone, you're like, oh, I should have had that little kitsch
For
experience.
the last, I want to say, like right before COVID hit, but for like a year up until then, they were auctioning off all the stuff. Like, so you could have walked away with like some cool Holy Land experience, sort of like marquees and props, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, decorate the house. Okay, I think we've gotten way away from Dalmatians, but hey, I mean, the theme parks adjacent to all this, right?
Well, we
So
we started out with Christian Science and ESP, and honestly, a god coming down from the sky and asking dogs if they wanted to go back up with him. And honestly, it might be good that we didn't get to go into my Heaven's Gate rant, which it just reminded me of that nonstop of the Hale Bopp comet and this Sirius dog star, and like, there's an oncoming nuclear war, but you can follow me, but you'll cease to exist, but you'll live in the stars forever. I don't know. I still want to see that movie.
yeah, yeah, the starlight barking.
Starlight Barking. Highly recommend. Even if you don't want to read the whole book, just read the synopsis in case this sounds like I'm just making it up. All of that 100% true. ESP, flying, technology, nuclear war, serious dog star, God, all of it.
I want to see Robert Zemeckis make that as one of his Uncanny Valley CGI films. That would be fantastic.
What and in a fun note to just put a cherry on top of that, in the Starlight Barking book, the Sirius, the Lord Dogstar, actually appears on top of Nelson's column, and that's like kind of like an important monument that I think dates back to very old times, like 20 BC or something, like the very original version, all the way to where, in World War II, Germany wanted to take it because it meant all this importance to them. And that's where Sirius, the dog star, appears, is on top of this column. And that exact same column in 2015, Disney paid, I think, like $30,000 to turn it into a huge giant lightsaber, to promote Star Wars. So I feel like Dodie Smith would have appreciated that, because she would have been like, "Oh, there's my Lord Dogstar appearing on the column."
Rough, rough.
Yeah, but also means that nuclear war was soon to follow. So